Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Glow Up Podcast. So today we're going to talk about a topic that I feel a lot of us struggle with. And it is one of those things that can not only affect our self-confidence, but also affect us from moving forward in our goals and our dreams and what we need to do. And like I tell you guys all the time, we got stuff to do, so we can't allow these things to hold us back. So today we're going to talk about imposter syndrome. So imposter syndrome is really common. So I'll go ahead and start off with the definition of imposter syndrome. So imposter syndrome is a psychological pattern where individuals doubt their skills, their talents or accomplishments, and have a persistent fear of being exposed as a fraud. So the word that stands out to me in this definition is definitely fear. So as we know, fear can hold us back. So fear of rejection, fear of what other people are going to think. Fear is just one of those things that is annoying and that we have to overcome. So to me, this is kind of the root. So I'll go ahead and continue. So despite external evidence of their competence, those experiencing imposter syndrome remain convinced that they are not capable as others perceive them to be, attributing their success to luck, timing, or deceiving others into thinking that they are more intelligent than they believe themselves to be. Y'all, I would tell you, 2 years ago, I had this happen strong, and it was hard to break. It was very hard to break. I ain't even going to lie to you guys. So I don't know. Been in my career long time. For some reason, I just started having these thoughts that I wasn't good enough or that I wasn't as good as the other recruiters. So I constantly compared myself. And so I felt that one of these days, people were going to find out that I wasn't as good as all the other recruiters, that I was actually a fraud, that they hired me because they had to meet a diversity quota. This is my thoughts at the time. They hired me because they had to meet a diversity quota and that I wasn't as good as the other recruiters, right? And so crazy thoughts. But at the time, this was very real to me. It was very real. And so it took me a while and a lot of time and intentionality for me to really overcome this. But imposter syndrome is something that a lot of people struggle with, even though it may not make sense. But in our minds, we think that it does. So in reality, I've been with the company for quite some time. I, always had great positive reviews. But in my mind, I just didn't feel like I was good enough. So, I feel that imposter syndrome is kind of twofold. I feel like you're dealing with that self-doubt, and then you're also dealing with that fear of man. And so I was actually proud of myself. I'll be honest with you guys today. So I had my performance review today, and it actually went well. So I usually have my performance reviews and they always go well, but I think I handled it a little bit differently this time. 2 years ago, I would get positive feedback and I would just say, okay, my manager's just being nice. Like, he doesn't really feel that way about me. So I would come up with every kind of excuse not to accept the positive feedback, right? But today I handled it differently. He was giving me the positive feedback and I accepted it. I was like, you know what? Thank you. Thank you, And so I accepted it now. I've gone through healing and I've kind of processed things differently. I kind of recognize that a lot of those thoughts were stemmed from, my internal belief that I wasn't good enough. And once I kind of got over that, things changed and the way that I perceived my feedback changed. I think with imposter syndrome, it's definitely twofold. So I think the first part of imposter syndrome is definitely self-doubt, having doubts about yourself and your abilities and what you can do. And then the other is fear of man, because obviously we're afraid that others are going to figure us out. So we have that sense of caring about what other people think. But in order to really overcome this, and some of the things that I did was I really had to focus on the self-doubt and tackle why am I doubting myself, and why am I feeling like I'm not capable, or feeling like I'm a fraud. Obviously, I've been at my job for quite a few years. I've been successful in my career. So really figuring out, why do I feel like I'm an imposter? The evidence isn't really supporting these thoughts. So, so I want to also give you guys a little bit more examples of what imposter syndrome look like. One, in a professional environment, you could have a new job, and you start this job and you may feel that they actually hired you by mistake because of the lack of experience or knowledge, and everybody's going to end up finding out. So we have those thoughts, but if we kind of take a step back, does that even make sense? Does that even make sense? So, so that's another example. Or an example of that could be, an individual who was recently promoted might feel that they're actually not truly qualified for this new role, and that they may fail to meet expectations. And so that's another example of imposter syndrome. I can give you guys another one. So in entrepreneurship, this is very common because I felt this way. So entrepreneurs may feel like imposters, believing that their business success is due to luck or external factors rather than their own vision and hard work. So these are some examples of how imposter syndrome can manifest. So let's talk about some ways that we can overcome imposter syndrome. So step one, I would say, is to obviously recognize when these thoughts come up. It's important to kind of recognize that and then label that as an imposter syndrome. You're having a moment where you're starting to feel like an imposter. So recognize when those thoughts come up, okay? And then understand that you're not alone. So anytime people are starting anything new, or they are, and it doesn't really have to be something new. It could just be like with me. I've been in my career for so long, and sometimes I feel like I'm an imposter. So know that you're not alone, but there are ways to overcome that. So recognize those thoughts, label those thoughts, and then the next step would be to redirect or reframe those thoughts. So when you have those negative self-doubt, people think that they're going to end up finding me out, that I'm not that great. Then you have to ask yourself that, is there evidence to support that negative thought? So in my case, I used to feel that people were going to figure out that I wasn't a good recruiter. So I had to take a step back, and I actually did like a wins journal, or like an accomplishment journal, to kind of go back and remind me of all the accomplishments I've had at my job. So you have to go back and look at your wins, and does this thought have any kind of support to it? If I was not good at my job and people felt like I wasn't good, I wouldn't be there for 5-6 years. So is there evidence that supports those thoughts? And then also, developing kind of like a growth mindset versus fixed. I think this is really important too, because when you have imposter syndrome, you also struggle with perfectionism. So you want to appear perfect. You don't want people to find you out. So you struggle with perfectionism too. And adopting a growth mindset is actually a game changer, because you tell yourself, hey, I may not have it all together. I may not be good in every area, but I'm growing, I'm learning, I'm developing. And, having a fixed mindset would make you think that you have to know it all. And if you don't know it, then people are going to judge you, but that's not the case. So anytime you have a growth mindset, you just tell yourself, I'm growing, I'm not perfect, but I'm learning and I'm growing. And then the next, I think we talked a little bit about this, kind of coming up with a wins journal. So celebrating your wins, so you can go back and redirect yourself when those negative thoughts come up. And then I think the last thing would be, let's start practicing self-compassion. It's like we can be our worst enemies. It's like we're so critical and judgmental of ourselves, and it doesn't help. It actually holds us back. And I wouldn't tell my friend that she sucks. I wouldn't tell my friend, I wouldn't be rude to my friend. So why am I being rude to myself? And so we have to practice being kind to ourselves and just allowing ourselves to grow and just not being so hard on ourselves. And so these are just some tips and tools that we can use to kind of overcome this imposter syndrome. And, it does take time because sometimes we don't recognize when we have those thoughts, but it's all about taking captive of those negative thoughts that come into our mind and replacing that with something positive. And doing those exercises, the more that you do them, the easier it will become. But, if you need a group or community to kind of help you out with how to recognize these thoughts and how to overcome them, definitely join our Glow Up community. We do have that. Or if you need to talk to a counselor, I definitely recommend doing that. But there are ways to overcome this. And imposter syndrome is not going to win. We got stuff to do. So we got to overcome this thing. And so I'm going to go ahead and end it there. Hopefully this was helpful, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.